Young women began to vanish, only to be found dead days later, their bodies marked with strange bite marks on their necks. The villagers whispered about these mysterious deaths. In that moment, a snake would slither from his trousers. Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing. Once upon a time, there were two siblings, Jack and Emma. They lived in a small town called Pinebrook, in a cozy house on Maple Street. Their parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were always busy with work. Jack was 9 years old and Emma was 7. They spent a lot of time alone at home, and though they didn't enjoy it, they tried to make the best of it by playing games or drawing. But there was always the TV, calling them with its bright lights and loud music. One evening, while their parents were still at work, Jack was watching TV when something caught his attention. It was a show that seemed different from what they usually watched. There were flashing lights, fast music, and adults talking in a way that was unfamiliar to Jack. Curious, he called to Emma, who was in the other room. Emma, come here and look at this, Jack called. Emma ran into the living room, her eyes wide with curiosity. She sat beside Jack, both of them staring at the screen in awe. They didn't understand much of what was happening, but it seemed exciting. Why are they doing that? Emma asked innocently, confused by what she was seeing. I don't know, Jack replied, his voice full of wonder. Maybe it's something fun that grown-ups do. The images on the screen continued, leaving them more confused but also intrigued. They had no idea that what they were watching was something meant for adults, not children. It was the first time they had ever seen something like that. After a few days, the images they had seen on TV stayed in their minds. Jack found himself thinking about it constantly. One afternoon, when their parents were away, Jack turned to Emma with a mischievous smile. Emma, remember that thing we saw on TV? Jack asked, his voice quiet and excited. Emma's face tensed. She remembered the strange, uncomfortable images. I don't know, Jack. It didn't feel right, she replied, her voice unsure. But Jack, feeling more and more curious, insisted. Come on, Emma, let's try it. It'll be like a fun adventure. Emma's heart raced. She didn't want to, but Jack kept pushing, saying things like, Remember when we sneaked out last time and no one found out? If you don't do this, I'll tell Mom and Dad. Emma felt trapped. She didn't know what to do, so reluctantly she agreed. Okay, Jack, she whispered. They went to the bedroom and tried to copy what they had seen on TV. But as soon as it happened, Emma felt pain she didn't expect. She screamed and ran to the living room, clutching her chest, tears streaming down her face. Jack, I never want to do that again. It hurts so much, she cried, feeling scared and confused. Jack didn't understand why Emma was so upset. He still thought it was just part of a game. But Emma felt deep inside that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like their usual fun games. This was painful and scary. As the days went by, Emma noticed that Jack was changing. He was more insistent, more stubborn, and she didn't recognize him as the brother she once knew. She felt more and more alone in her confusion. One day, Mrs. Thompson came home briefly to pick up some things. Emma saw her chance and tried to speak up. Mom, can I talk to you? She asked, her voice shaking. Mrs. Thompson, distracted by her phone and rushing around, barely looked up. Not now, Emma. I'm busy, she said, without giving her daughter a second thought. Emma stood there for a moment, her heart sinking. She wanted to tell her mom about everything that had happened, but it felt like no one was listening. Emma retreated to her room, feeling invisible. The next day, after Jack asked Emma to do the same thing again, Emma couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the house, not knowing where to go. She ended up standing at the door of their neighbor, Aunt Grace. Aunt Grace knelt down to meet Emma at eye level, concerned by the look on her face. What's wrong, Emma? She asked gently. Emma burst into tears and told Aunt Grace everything, how Jack had kept asking her to copy what they had seen on TV, how scared and confused she was, and how she felt trapped. Aunt Grace wrapped Emma in a comforting hug. "You did the right thing by telling me," she said. "You don't have to carry this alone. I'm here for you." With Aunt Grace's help, Emma felt a little better. She was safe now. Aunt Grace promised to help her, and Emma finally felt a sense of relief. When Mr. and Mrs. Thompson found out what had happened, they were shocked. Mr. Thompson didn't believe it at first. "Jack wouldn't do something like that," he said. Mrs. Thompson tried to downplay the situation, but Aunt Grace stood firm. Children see things on TV, and if they're not guided, they try to make sense of it in their own way, Aunt Grace explained. "You've been so focused on work that you didn't see what your children were watching. This is a warning." Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were silent. They realized that their neglect had allowed their children to be exposed to things they didn't understand. The Thompsons knew they had to change. They began to monitor what Jack and Emma watched on TV and made sure it was age-appropriate. They also encouraged their children to talk about their feelings and thoughts. Jack and Emma started seeing a counselor to help them understand what had happened and heal from the experience. Slowly, their home changed. Mrs. Thompson reduced her work hours, and Mr. Thompson started spending more time with his children on weekends. They all played games together, read stories, and enjoyed being a family again. Jack and Emma began to laugh again, rediscovering the bond they once shared. The painful silence was replaced by love, laughter, and the warmth of a family who had learned the importance of being there for each other. One evening, as they played a game together, Emma turned to her parents with a small smile. "Thank you for listening to me," she said, her voice soft but full of meaning. Her words brought tears to her mother's eyes, and the family knew that they had made a fresh start. The Thompsons understood that the greatest gift they could give each other was their time, attention, and love. And with that, they promised to always be there for one another. This is the end of our story. It teaches us that the most important thing we can do for our children is to listen and love them. They should always feel heard and understood. Change begins when we listen to their voices. So if you find my video interesting, kindly give me a follow and peace. In a quiet village named Ekwu, nestled among lush hills in Nigeria, life was simple and peaceful. The villagers were friendly, sharing stories in the evenings after a long day of farming and fetching water. Everyone knew each other, and news spread quickly. But recently, an unsettling fear settled over Ekwu. Young women began to vanish, only to be found dead days later, their bodies marked with strange bite marks on their necks. The villagers whispered about these mysterious deaths, which felt like the work of a hidden predator. Chief Ikenna sent hunters into the nearby forest to seek out the creature responsible, but they returned empty-handed. As fear gripped the village, mothers warned their daughters to stay indoors, even during the day. Ekwu, once filled with laughter, grew quiet and tense. Amidst this fear, there was one man who seemed unfazed. His name was Kelechi, tall and handsome, with a smile that could melt hearts. He was a skilled builder. His charm dazzled the women, making them forget the danger lurking in the shadows. With his smooth skin and sparkling eyes, Kelechi walked through Ekwu like he owned it. Women giggled and blushed whenever he passed, drawn to him like moths to a flame. But Kelechi harbored a dark secret. He didn't care about the deaths or the fear that enveloped Ekwu. He reveled in his charm, using it to lure women away from the watchful eyes of the village. Under the cover of night, he would take them to his hut on the outskirts of the village. There, he would enchant them with his words and warmth. But just before the night turned dark, he would ask a chilling question. "Do you know the difference between a man's manhood and a snake?" The women would laugh, thinking it was a joke. But before they could respond, Kelechi would whistle a soft, eerie tune that filled the air with dread. In that moment, a snake would slither from his trousers, its cold body wrapping around them before delivering a deadly bite. The bite left 2 sharp marks, and within moments, the women would be lifeless, their bodies found the next day with the same mysterious markings. As the village mourned, no one ever suspected Kelechi. He was too charming, too perfect. Each death deepened the villagers' fear, but Kelechi continued his life as if nothing were wrong. The women remained oblivious to the danger that lurked beneath his good looks. With a confident air, Adaise caught Kelechi's eye the moment he saw her. At the village well, while other women giggled and blushed, she remained composed, seemingly unaffected by his charm. Kelechi was intrigued. He had never encountered a woman who didn't fall for his allure. Determined to win her over, Kelechi began to follow Adaise, seeking every opportunity to talk to her. But she kept her distance, never allowing him to get too close. The more she resisted, the more obsessed he became. One afternoon, Kelechi saw his chance when Adaise was at the well, carrying her water pot. He approached her with his signature smile, offering to help. She accepted, but remained polite yet distant. He felt a thrill of victory lifting the pot onto his head. But Adaise's cool demeanor only fueled his desire to conquer her heart. Days turned into weeks, and Kelechi was consumed by thoughts of Adaise. She was different from the others, and her refusal to give in only made him want her more. He decided to change his approach, playing it cool to intrigue her instead. Soon enough, Adaise began to notice his absence, and curiosity sparked within her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kelechi invited Adaise to his hut. She hesitated but eventually agreed. Inside, the flickering light from an oil lamp cast shadows on the walls. As they shared palm wine, Kelechi leaned closer, whispering sweet words, while secretly plotting to use his deadly charm. Adaise felt a sense of unease but remained calm. Then Kelechi asked his infamous question again. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, he whistled that haunting tune that summoned his serpent. But this time, Adaise was ready. With a swift motion, she produced a small silver flute from her wrapper and blew into it. The sound pierced the air, startling the snake. Kelechi watched in shock as the creature hesitated, turning its attention from Adaise to him. Panicking, he stumbled back as the snake coiled around him instead, its grip tightening dangerously. "How did you?" Kelechi gasped, realization dawning on him. Adaise stood firm, her expression steady. "You're not the only one who knows how to control a snake," she replied. "Now it's time you face the consequences of your actions." Before he could protest, the snake struck, its venom coursing through Kelechi's veins. He collapsed, gasping as the life drained from him. Adaise stood over him, a mix of determination and grief in her eyes. Kelechi's reign of terror had come to an end. The next morning, the villagers gathered in shock at the sight of Kelechi's lifeless body in the village square, the snake by his side, defeated. Adaise spoke to the crowd, revealing the truth about the man they had once admired. Kelechi had used his charm to mask his dark deeds, but now the villagers were free from the fear he had instilled in them. As time passed, the tale of Kelechi and Adaise became a legend in Ekwu. Mothers warned their daughters about the dangers of seductive charm, reminding them that not all that glitters is gold. Adaise's bravery was celebrated, her name remembered with honor, while Kelechi's memory faded into obscurity. Life in Ekwu returned to normal, but the lessons learned from the past remained etched in the hearts of its people. Adaise had not only avenged her friend, but had saved countless others from the fate that had befallen so many before her. Ekwu thrived once more, a place of laughter and life, free from shadows of the past. Marcos Rojas, known as El Diablo, was a feared drug lord who controlled a huge criminal empire. His reach stretched from South America to Europe, and he made millions by selling drugs. He was known for being cruel, and he used violence to keep everyone under control. His mansion was guarded like a fortress, and the people who worked for him were too scared to defy him. El Diablo had many servants who did his bidding. They had to obey him, no matter what. If they didn't, they would be killed without hesitation. One of his most trusted servants was Arturo. Arturo had worked for El Diablo for many years, rising from a poor man with no power to one of the drug lord's right-hand men. Arturo did everything for El Diablo, even killing when ordered. But over time, Arturo started to feel uneasy. He had seen too much pain and destruction caused by El Diablo. He began to feel guilty for all the people who had died because of the drug lord. Arturo realized that El Diablo wasn't a man to be feared. He was a monster. Every day he watched as people's lives were ruined, families were torn apart, and even innocent people died. Arturo couldn't ignore it anymore. The man he had served for so long was a tyrant, and Arturo knew he had to do something to stop him. One night, after El Diablo ordered the death of an old friend who had become useless to him, Arturo decided it was time. He couldn't stay in the drug lord's service any longer. He couldn't watch any more innocent people suffer. With a heavy heart, Arturo walked into El Diablo's private room. El Diablo was sitting calmly in a chair as usual. When he saw Arturo, he smiled. "Arturo," El Diablo said smoothly, "did you take care of the job as I asked?" "Yes, my lord," Arturo replied. But inside, he felt like he was going to explode. He knew what he had to say next. "I can't do this anymore," Arturo said. His voice was shaky but firm. "I can't serve you any longer. I can't keep doing your dirty work." El Diablo's face darkened. He stared at Arturo with cold eyes. No one had ever dared to speak to him like that before. For a moment, El Diablo didn't say anything. Then slowly he stood up. "You want to betray me?" El Diablo asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I made you. You were nothing before I found you. You owe everything to me." Arturo stood tall, but his heart was pounding. "I don't owe you anything. I can't live with the blood on my hands anymore. I'm done." El Diablo stepped closer, his anger rising. "You think you can just leave me? I have the power to destroy you in an instant. No one betrays me and lives." But Arturo didn't back down. He had made up his mind. "It ends tonight." El Diablo's eyes flashed with rage. He raised his hand, signaling for his guards to attack. But before the guards could rush in, the door to the room flew open. Miguel, an old friend and former ally of El Diablo, entered the room. He was followed by a group of rebels, people who had once served El Diablo but had turned against him. They were all ready to fight back, to finally end El Diablo's reign of terror. The fight that followed was intense. Gunshots rang out, and the sounds of fighting echoed through the mansion. El Diablo's guards, though many, were not prepared for the rebellion. Arturo and the rebels fought hard, knowing this was their only chance. El Diablo's power, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now fading. His empire was crumbling. In the final moments, it was just Arturo and El Diablo left. The two men faced each other in the middle of the room. El Diablo was angry, but he was also scared. His power was slipping away. "You thought you could control everything," Arturo said, his voice steady, "but you're not untouchable. You were the one who was broken." El Diablo raised his hand, ready to strike, but before he could do anything, Arturo pulled out a gun and fired. El Diablo fell to the ground, his reign of terror ending with one shot. The mansion was silent after El Diablo's death. His empire was over. His guards scattered, and his wealth and power disappeared. The people who had once been afraid of him now saw a chance for a new life, free from fear. Arturo, who had once been a servant, had become a hero. He had stopped El Diablo, and with him, the darkness that had ruled their lives for so long. The rebels who helped Arturo took the opportunity to rebuild, working together to fix the damage caused by El Diablo. They began to heal the broken communities, and people slowly started to rebuild their lives. But Arturo knew the fight was far from over. Evil never truly disappears. There would always be others who wanted power, who wanted to hurt others to get what they wanted. But Arturo was ready. He promised himself that he would keep fighting, to make sure no one would ever again fall under the control of someone like El Diablo. The world was now a little safer, but there would always be a need for men like Arturo, those who were willing to stand up to evil, no matter the cost. And for Arturo, that was enough. "Chijioke, this game is just for us. It's a secret, and no one else can play," she whispered, her voice low and conspiratorial. Intrigued but slightly apprehensive, Chijioke agreed, thinking it was just another fun activity they could share. However, as the hours passed, he quickly realized that this game was unlike any he had ever played before. Auntie Ify guided him through actions and intimate interactions that made him feel uncomfortable and confused. The laughter and fun he had expected were replaced by feelings of anxiety and fear. "Auntie, I don't like this game," he finally said. In the vibrant town of Enugu, Nigeria, young Chijioke was known for his infectious laughter and boundless energy. At just 10 years old, he was a lively primary school student who found joy in playing football with his friends and losing himself in adventure-filled storybooks. However, life at home was often lonely. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ease, ran a bustling shop in the local market, working long hours to provide for their only son. Chijioke would return from school around 3 p.m. to an empty house, counting down the hours until his mother would come home at 6 p.m. to fill the space with warmth and love. "Mommy, I'm so bored," he would groan on the days he felt particularly lonely. His mother would always respond with a gentle smile. "I know, Chijioke, but it's only for a little while. We have to work hard to give you everything you need." While he understood the necessity of their hard work, he often found himself wishing for more time with them. One sunny afternoon, while contemplating his boredom, Mrs. Ease had an idea. "Chijioke," she said, "why don't we ask Auntie Ify, our neighbor, to look after you until we get back?" Auntie Ify was a cheerful woman in her late 20s, known for her kindness and her delicious snacks. Chijioke adored her playful spirit and the way she always seemed to have a warm smile and a, "Okay, Mommy, I think that's a great idea," he exclaimed, excited at the prospect of spending time with someone he trusted. Chijioke felt a sense of relief as he realized he wouldn't have to stay alone anymore. The next day after school, he went to Auntie Ify's home, where he was greeted with open arms and a plate of jollof rice that filled the air with a mouth-watering aroma. "How was school today, Chijioke?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with interest. "It was good, Auntie Ify. We learned about animals and the environment," he replied, his enthusiasm bubbling over. She listened intently as he shared stories about his friends and the games they played, making him feel valued and important. As the weeks went by, Chijioke started spending most afternoons at Auntie Ify's house. He found comfort in her company, and she quickly became a significant part of his life. She showered him with kindness, taking him to the local market, where they would buy sweets and treats. Auntie Ify even bought him a video game console, something he had always dreamt of owning. "This is for you, Chijioke," she said as she handed him the gift, her smile wide and genuine. "You deserve it for being such a good boy." Chijioke was overjoyed. "Thank you, Auntie. You're the best," he exclaimed, feeling a rush of gratitude. Little did he know, the shadows lurking beneath Auntie Ify's kindness were about to surface. One Tuesday afternoon, Auntie Ify suggested a new game that she claimed was special. "Chijioke, this game is just for us. It's a secret and no one else can play," she whispered, her voice low and conspiratorial. Intrigued but slightly apprehensive, Chijioke agreed, thinking it was just another fun activity they could share. However, as the hours passed, he quickly realized that this game was unlike any he had ever played before. Auntie Ify guided him through actions and intimate interactions that made him feel uncomfortable and confused. The laughter and fun he had expected were replaced by feelings of anxiety and fear. "Auntie, I don't like this game," he finally said, a worried expression creeping onto his face. "Don't worry, Chijioke," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You'll get used to it. Everyone plays this game at some point." Her words felt like a heavy weight pressing down on him, and for the first time he questioned the nature of their interactions. Days turned into weeks, and the visits to Auntie Ify's house became a source of dread for Chijioke. He would often linger at school, dragging his feet, hoping to delay his return home. On particularly challenging days, he would sit alone on the schoolyard bench, lost in thought, wishing he could escape the uncomfortable reality that awaited him. One evening, after another unsettling session with Auntie Ify, Chijioke felt an overwhelming urge to confide in his parents, but fear gripped him. How could he explain the strange happenings without sounding foolish? That night, he gathered the courage to approach his mother as she prepared dinner. "Mommy, I need to talk to you about something," he began hesitantly. "What is it, Chijioke?" she asked, turning her attention to him, a hint of impatience in her tone. "It's about Auntie Ify." But before he could finish, she interrupted. "Chijioke, We work hard to provide for you. Auntie Ify is here to help us. You'll grow to like her." Feeling dismissed, Chijioke turned away, his heart heavy with sadness. "Okay, Mommy," he murmured, retreating to his room, where he cried silently into his pillow. He felt trapped in a world where no one understood his struggles. The following morning, Chijioke woke up in shock. He had wet the bed. The embarrassment washed over him like a cold wave. He hadn't done this since he was a toddler, and the thought of admitting it to his parents terrified him. He quickly changed the sheets and hid the evidence, hoping they wouldn't notice. Days turned into a month, and the bedwetting continued. Yet his parents remained oblivious. Chijioke felt the weight of his secret growing heavier each day. One afternoon, he went to Auntie Ify's, where she greeted him with a smile and a plate of food. But this time, he felt a surge of determination. "Auntie Ify," he began, "I don't like your game. It's making me wet the bed every night. I don't feel good." Her expression shifted, and for a fleeting moment, Chijioke saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. "It's normal for boys your age, Chijioke. You'll get past it," she assured him, but her words did little to alleviate his worries. As the weeks went by, Chijioke found it harder to concentrate in school. The once enthusiastic boy who loved to play now sat quietly in class, staring blankly at the board. His friends noticed his change and tried to cheer him up, but nothing seemed to help. The whispers of Auntie Ify's game haunted him, making his heart race with anxiety. Mrs. Nwogu, his teacher, had always been attentive and caring. She noticed the changes in Chijioke and approached him one day after class. "Chijioke, you seem a bit off lately. Is everything all right?" she asked gently. He stood before her, contemplating whether to share his burdens. "Everything is fine," he lied, his voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Nwogu, sensing his discomfort, leaned closer. "If you're facing any personal challenges, you can talk to me. I'm here to help." Her sincere offer touched something deep within Chijioke, but fear held him back. He couldn't bring himself to share the truth, not yet. That day as he walked home, he prayed that his parents would be there waiting for him, but they were not. The familiar dread washed over him as he stepped into Auntie Ify's house once more. The game resumed, and this time, something felt different. Chijioke noticed new, unsettling feelings as Auntie Ify continued her routine. Confused and scared, he decided that he had to tell someone, anyone. The next day at school, he summoned all his courage. As Mrs. Nwogu sat at her desk, he approached her, feeling a knot in his stomach. "Auntie, I need to tell you something important," he whispered, lowering his gaze. She looked at him with concern, encouraging him to continue. "Auntie Ify, our neighbor, does things to me that I can't explain," he finally confessed, his voice trembling. Mrs. Nwogu's expression changed to one of alarm. "Chijioke, you did the right thing by telling me," she said, her tone firm yet gentle. "No child should go through what you've experienced." With Mrs. Nwogu's support, Chijioke felt a weight lift off his shoulders. She immediately arranged a meeting with the school authorities, determined to address the situation seriously. The following day, Mr. and Mrs. Ease were called to the school to discuss the troubling news about their son. "Is Chijioke in trouble?" Mrs. Ez asked anxiously as they entered the headmistress's office. "No, please have a seat," the headmistress replied, her expression grave. "What we need to discuss is far more serious. Your son has revealed some distressing information about Auntie Ify." Mr. Ease's face turned pale as the headmistress recounted Chijioke's experiences. "She has been taking advantage of him, and we need to take action," she stated firmly. Mr. Ease clenched his fists, furious and heartbroken for his son. After a lengthy discussion, they decided to involve the authorities. That evening, as Chijioke sat in his room, he felt a mix of relief and fear. He was glad that someone was finally listening, but he was terrified of what Auntie Ify might do when she found out. Later that night, a heavy knock echoed through Auntie Ify's door. When she opened it, she was met by stern police officers. "You are under arrest for child molestation," one officer declared, his voice unwavering. Auntie Ify stood frozen in shock, her cheerful demeanor replaced by confusion and fear. As Chijioke watched from his window, he felt a rush of relief flood over him. He had finally escaped the grip of Auntie Ify. From that day forward, his parents made it a priority to be present in his life. They took turns picking him up from school and spent quality time with him, ensuring he felt loved and supported. At school, Mrs. Nogu kept a close eye on Chijioke, reassuring him and encouraging all her students to speak up whenever they faced challenges. Slowly but surely, Chijioke began to heal, although the memory of Auntie Ify still lingered. The bedwetting did not stop immediately, and his parents sought help from a therapist who assured them that with time and patience, Chijioke would overcome his fears. As weeks turned into months, he began to find joy in his life again, rediscovering the love for football and books that once defined him. With the support of his parents, teachers, and friends, Chijioke learned to trust again. He realized that it was okay to ask for help and that he was never alone in his struggles. The journey to healing was long, but every step forward was a victory that reaffirmed his strength and resilience. And in the end, Chijioke emerged not only as a survivor, but as a beacon of hope for others, proving that even in the darkest of times, there is always a way to find the light. In the bustling city of Abuja, the grand estate of Chief Nwosu stood tall, a shining example of wealth, power, and influence. Once a celebrated businessman, Chief Nwosu was now a divorced man with a tarnished reputation. His name still echoed in social circles, but whispers of scandal followed him everywhere. His adult children living abroad remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind the high walls of their father's estate. In this estate worked Ada, a humble housekeeper who had always been a silent observer of the lives around her. Each day she polished the luxurious furnishings, swept the grand hallways, and tidied up after the many glamorous women who flitted in and out of Chief Nwosu's life. Each one was charmed by his reckless allure, representing the world Ada longed for, a world filled with wealth and power that seemed just out of reach. But inside her, ambition burned brightly. She dreamed of more than just being a servant. She wanted to be by his side, to be his partner, and perhaps even the mother of his child. One morning, after an extravagant party had left the house in chaos, Ada ventured into the chief's lavish bedroom to clean up the remnants of the night. Amid the mess of empty glasses and discarded decorations, her eyes fell upon something startling, a used condom carelessly left on the floor. This was not just a discarded item. It was a chance for the future she desperately sought. In a bold act of ambition, Ada carefully took the condom and inseminated herself, believing this was her only path to securing a place in Chief Nwosu's life. Weeks passed, and the quiet of Ada's modest home shattered when she discovered she was pregnant, with twins. Hope filled her heart. These children could be her ticket to the life she had only dreamed of. She envisioned the day Chief Nwosu would finally acknowledge her, not as a servant, but as someone important in his life. With newfound determination, Ada prepared to confront him, knowing this revelation would change everything. One calm evening, Ada found the courage to enter Chief Nwosu's private study. He sat there, a glass of whiskey in hand, gazing out the window as the last rays of sunlight faded. "I have something to tell you," she began, her voice trembling yet steady. "I'm pregnant." She took a deep breath. "And you are the father." Chief Nwosu's face twisted in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice cold and harsh. "I never had a relationship with you." Ada's heart raced as she boldly repeated her claim. "I'm carrying your twins." His response was furious. "This is absurd. You must be out of your mind." He stormed across the room, pointing toward the door. "Get out of my house." For a moment, Ada stood frozen, the weight of his rejection crashing down on her like a heavy stone. But her ambition was too strong to quell. She turned and left, but the fire within her did not extinguish. A few days later, the estate buzzed with excitement, hosting an important event. Guests arrived for a celebration, and the mansion was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, in the scent of expensive food. Chief Nwosu, still reeling from their earlier confrontation, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, yet the tension was palpable. Ada entered the grand hall with a newfound purpose. She was no longer just the quiet servant. She was a woman wronged, a woman with a secret to expose. As the evening's festivities continued, she approached the center of the room, feeling all eyes turn to her. "Everyone needs to hear the truth," she declared, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength with each word. "On a night when you were drunk, you seduced me, and now I am pregnant with your children." Gasps filled the room as the crowd processed her shocking announcement. Chief Nwosu's face turned pale. Disbelief etched across his features. Whispers rippled through the gathering as shock settled in. "You're lying!" he shouted, but the momentum of the scandal could not be contained. As the news spread across Abuja like wildfire, Chief Nwosu's reputation began to unravel. Business partners who once stood by him distanced themselves, and his children, angry and disillusioned, refused to speak to him. The fallout was swift and merciless, leaving him scrambling to salvage what was left of his dignity. His every move was now scrutinized, and the empire he built was slowly sinking into ruin. Determined to clear his name, Chief Nwosu's lawyer suggested a DNA test, confident it would prove Ada's claims false. As the tension mounted, both sides anxiously awaited the results. Ada, certain the test would confirm her story, steeled herself for what she believed would be her victory. However, when the results came back, everyone was shocked to learn that the twins were not Chief Nwosu's children. The courtroom fell silent, and Ada's heart sank as she realized her carefully woven tale had unraveled. Just as she began to collect herself, she blurted out, "But I used your condom from your own bedroom." The revelation sent shockwaves through the room, leaving everyone in disbelief and confusion about who could truly be the father. Suddenly, a new figure entered the courtroom, Chijoke, a former maid who had worked in the estate years before. She had attended the hearing out of curiosity, and her presence would turn the tide of the trial. "I remember that night," she began, her voice steady and calm. "I saw someone else enter the chief's room that evening." Murmurs spread through the courtroom as everyone hung on her words. "It was Ugo the gateman," she continued. "I saw him sneak into the chief's room late that night." The tension escalated as the judge ordered a review of the CCTV footage from that evening. When the video played, the room fell silent. There it was, Ugo slipping into Chief Nwosu's room under the cover of darkness. The evidence was undeniable, and it became clear that the real betrayal lay with Ugo's reckless actions. With the truth unfolding, Ugo was called to the stand. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was reckless. I never thought something like this would come to light." As the court listened attentively, he bowed his head in shame. What had started as a scandal about Chief Nwosu's supposed infidelity had now completely shifted. The real betrayal lay in Ugo's actions and his willingness to cover up his involvement in a way that threatened to destroy multiple lives. In the midst of the chaos, Ada gave birth to the twins. These children, born of ambition and deceit, became symbols of a desperate woman's hunger for power. The estate, once grand and full of life, now stood as a shadow of its former glory, echoing with the memories of the past. As the twins grew, they became constant reminders of the mistakes and lies that surrounded their birth. The legal battle continued, with Ada facing charges of deception and manipulation. Her world was unraveling, and though she was free from jail, the legal system offered no mercy. The court's final ruling would decide her fate and the future of the twins, caught in the web of their parents' ambitions. As Ada faced the possibility of jail time, she realized her only chance to avoid prison lay with Chief Nwosu. She had crossed lines she never imagined, but could she redeem herself for the sake of her children? With the court's decision looming, the suspense thickened. Would Chief Nwosu allow her a final chance at redemption, or would he turn his back on her forever? In a surprising and selfless move, Chief Nwosu decided to withdraw the court case. Despite Ada's betrayal, he couldn't bear to see the twins suffer for their parents' mistakes. He made the difficult decision to spare her from jail time, but made it clear there would be no reconciliation between them. Ada was no longer to be part of his world. Instead, she would raise the twins under court supervision, with Ugo, whose actions had compounded the scandal, playing a role in their upbringing. The compound was forever changed. Chief Nwosu, now free from the grip of scandal, could not escape the haunting reality of his past. His reputation was tarnished, but he slowly began to rebuild his life, keeping a safe distance from the people who had once been part of his world. Ada and Ugo, on the other hand, were left to navigate the complexities of raising twins who bore the weight of their parents' legacy. Though the children were innocent, they were caught in a legacy of betrayal, ambition, and scandal. As they grew, they would come to learn the heavy truth of their origins. In the end, the story of the twins was not one of grand redemption, but a tale of the consequences of ambition and deception. The legacy of a broken family and a shattered empire lived on, a silent reminder that sometimes the pursuit of power and love comes at a cost too high to bear. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel for more African folktales and legends. Help us keep the traditions of our ancestors alive by sharing our content with friends and family. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing our next story with you.